Week 3, day 2. The quality this week, selfless. Yesterday we wrote down the 3 goals we're going to accomplish, and you can write those down 3 per day, 3 per week, whatever it might be. But you take it a little bit at a time, becoming purpose driven. The quality this week is selfless. And the definition is obviously the opposite of being selfish. Worry more about other people than you do yourself. That's selfless. That's being selfless. And I talked about yesterday that I think athletics tends to teach selflessness if it is well coached. One thing that I haven't talked about a lot that people need to make sure you understand, athletics does not teach character. That is one of the oldest and the biggest lies that's ever been told. Athletics teaches blocking, tackling, throwing, catching, kicking. That's what it teaches. Athletics does not teach character. As a matter of fact, Dr. Sharon Stull actually did a study that proved athletics can destroy character. If you teach a player that if you don't get caught holding, it's not holding, he can take that same concept to a supermarket and steal, and if he doesn't get caught, it's not stealing. So athletics, in a way, it can build players up to an exaggerated form of who they are. Athletics doesn't teach character. Now, athletics can certainly teach selflessness if you have a coach and you have a way of doing it and you make sure that the we becomes before the me. That is a great one. You know, I'm often asked, and I'm sure most coaches are, if you coach for any length of time and coaching for 40 years and winning some games, you're asked, who is your favorite player? And I think most coaches really have a tendency to evade that question, and they say, well, I really didn't have a favorite. I had a lot of great players and all that. I did have a lot of great players. I had just an unbelievably amount of awesome players. But I did have a favorite, and wouldn't need doubt in my mind, Ryan Hinch was my favorite player in all the 40 years that I coached, and it was a simple reason. When we were beginning the 1990 football season, we had everything. I mean, we had a lot of players coming back. We had a great quarterback. We had receivers. We had a great defense. There wasn't anything lacking except we were missing one offensive lineman. We needed a center. I mean, in the worst way. We had the center from the previous year coming back, but we were going to move him to guard, and we needed a center. Ryan Hinch was a quarterback in junior high, in the 7th and 8th and 9th grade. And Ryan Hinch was going to be a sophomore. And I knew, or I felt like I knew, that Ryan Hinch could be a truly great center. His flexibility, his quickness, his intelligence, his leadership, all those things, I really felt like he could be a great center. He was going to be a sophomore, 151 pounds, 5'9" tall, going to be a sophomore. So before I moved somebody from one position to another, I always talk to them. Because if you don't go through that and you just move them, you end up having lots of problems. One thing that I really tried to get across to our players every year was that you've got to compete. You can't compete, you've got to cooperate. And in order for players to cooperate with me, they needed to understand why was I doing what I did. So I always tried to talk to the player before I moved him from one position to another. And Ryan was moving from the most prestigious position on the football team, a quarterback, to the least prestigious, the center. Nobody knows who the center on any football team is. And everybody knows who the quarterback is. So I called Ryan in and I said, Ryan, I want to move you to center. But I didn't want to move you to center until I talked to you and found out what your feelings were. And I will never forget. Ryan Hinch looked at me and he said, Coach, I don't think that's my job. He said, my job is to simply do the best I can wherever you place me. It's your job to put me where I can help this team the most. Mental age, Do you think that was a boy talking, or do you think that was a full-grown man? I don't care what his age was. He was either 15 or 16. I have no idea if he was 15 or 16, but I know he was a full-grown man mentally. He was willing to give up being that quarterback if I thought it would help our football team. Ryan Hinch started 16 football games at center for the Texas State champions. Many good coaches placed their very best football player over Ryan Hinch. We played a playoff game, and we were playing against a team that had a future NFL defensive lineman on the team. Guess where they placed him? They placed him right over Ryan Hinch because that coach looked at that roster and he said, this kid's 5'9", 151, and he's a sophomore. We're going to win that battle. They didn't win that battle. Ryan Hinch did. And when I think back, and you think of all the talented kids I had, God gave them that talent. Or if you're an atheist, they got it from their parents. But Ryan Hinch was the most selfless individual I believe I ever coached. And I know today he's a successful person. He's a good father. He's a good husband. There's no doubt in my mind, because Ryan Hinch cares a lot more about everybody else than he does about himself. Had it not been for Ryan Hinch making that move, I do not believe we would have won the state championship. And I believe because he did make that move, we did win it. So he gave up this little bit of glory to be what he became. Now, you look at the questions, and be sure that you understand, you've got to write the answers to these questions. And we're on page 26 of the curriculum. This is page 26 of the curriculum. And you need to write the answers to these questions, because the RAS, and we've talked about that, and I'm sure you're getting tired of hearing the reticular activating system. You need to participate, make the commitment to answer these questions. What do you think being selfless cost Ryan Hinch? What do you think it cost him? Let me ask you this. Would you do it? If you're an athlete, and would you go from being a quarterback to being an offensive lineman? Would you give up being a starter to do this? All the time, I used to tell our players all the time, when you go home and your dad is sitting at the dinner table and he says, you ought to be the fullback. I'm telling you right now, that coach is crazy. He ought to have you at fullback. He's right. Don't argue with him, and don't stick up for me. He may be right. But we don't need a fullback. We already got a fullback. What I need is a defensive lineman. And this team needs you as defensive lineman. Are you willing to give up being selfless to be a defensive lineman? Because you don't get to play every place you want to play. What does being selfless cost you? Well, it costs you maybe a glory position. Ryan Hinch had to give up being a quarterback. And as a sophomore quarterback, I have no doubt he would have been our JV quarterback and may have eventually become our quarterback. We had a good JV quarterback, so I didn't think we needed that. And Ryan Hinch's response, Coach, it's not my job to figure that out. That's your job. It's my job to do everything I can to be successful, to help this team. Number two, second question, what was the reward for Ryan Hinch? Now, I know the first thing you're going to say, and what everybody else is going to say, state champions, they won the state championship. I don't believe it. I mean, I agree that was a byproduct. I do not believe that was the reward that Ryan Hinch had. I believe the fact that he knew every day in the season of 1990 that he was giving up something to be a part of something bigger than himself. And I think that's it. That's why athletics can help you become selfless. Do not forget, mental age and selflessness are going to go hand in hand. See you tomorrow.